Here's your wheel where I removed it. And this speed sensor, you see this wire, goes to your car's computer, and it tells the wheel how fast it's going, and your car's anti-lock braking system needs to be able to register that in order to know that important information. So it needs this wheel speed sensor here itself. Let's go back to the car itself. Computer. That was fault number 1. Let's look at fault number 2. That's none to worry about. That's like system voltage has gotten below 9 volts. That may have been from a battery being a little weak. None to worry about that. And the steering angle sensor. The steering angle sensor is not working. What the steering angle sensor is, it sits down at the base of the steering column itself, and it looks at the actual angle of the wheel itself, and it has to know that in order to calculate what the anti-lock braking system is going to do. So it needs to not only know how fast your car is going down the road, it needs to know whether you're turning hard to the left, hard to the right, or slightly to the left, slightly to the right, in order for it to make its calculations for safe braking. And then there's also another fault here. This is fault number 4. It's a redundant fault talking about the wheel speed sensor, and that's causing this light to come on, and that is caused by the actual pad sensor itself. So you've got on your car, you've got a anti-lock brake sensor here that measures how fast the wheel is, and then you've got this little sensor here. It measures whether your brakes are wore out. Your brakes are not wore out, but what I've seen is that oftentimes people will put brake pads on and they'll reuse the sensor, and when they do that, then this brake pad wear sensor light will continue to stay on until you put a new wheel sensor in it. So far what I wanted to show you and say to you is, if you're going to get rid of the ABS light, the brake pad wear light, and the traction light, you're going to need to have a brake pad wear sensor, a anti-lock wheel speed sensor, and then you'll also have to have the steering angle replaced and the steering column itself replaced. So that takes care of the faults that you had mentioned. I'm going to go ahead and look at some others here too, just while we're here. You've got some other faults that are in the, you can see these in the instrument cluster. I'm not really worried about any of these. They're not serious faults. You weren't complaining about them, and so I don't see any reason really not to worry with them. A CAN bus, no message. That's a communication error. It's not a real big deal. I'm simply going to clear those faults. There is one computer though. This does give me a little bit of a concern. The central body electronics. That's the main computer that controls the windows and the doors and all the interior lights and the sliding, not the sliding roof, but the power door locks, things such as that. It's got a lot of faults in it. Let's see, I'll show you what I mean. So it's got 20 faults. This is just fault number 1 of 20. That's a lot of faults, and usually when I see that many faults inside here, it means that there's either been a problem with the wiring itself due to water ingress, like water getting inside the car and ruining the wiring, or the main body control computer is gone feet up, or it's failed. Now, I'm not going to suggest replacing it or doing anything about this other than just simply, I'm going to clear the faults. But I do want you to be mindful in the future, if you have certain buggy things that don't work, the wipers don't come on, or your power windows don't work, or you told me the door locks weren't working. But if you get any other type of problem with the electricals on the car, that is, the electricals not having to do with the engine itself, then it would need to come back in for further diagnosis. Now, one last light you were concerned about, which was safety related, was the airbag light itself. And when we go in and look at this fault, we're going to be this is the SRS, the supplemental restraint system. Supplemental restraint system. That's also known as the airbag computer itself. And when we read the fault out on this, it's showing power supply. I'm not really worried about the power supply. Again, that could have been due to a battery just getting a little bit low. But here's the one that is seat occupancy detector on the passenger side. So if we look over here on the passenger side seat, there's a big sensor that sits inside here. And what it does is it actually measures the weight and whether this seat is being occupied by someone in order to calculate whether the passenger airbag, which is inside the dash here, should deploy in the event of an accident. The problem is, if this sensor fails, it shuts the whole airbag system down. So it shuts down this side of the airbag too. Anytime you see this light on with the airbag, that means that the airbag system will not deploy in the event of an accident. So you don't have any airbag system until you were to get this fixed. I'm not going to send an estimate on this until you call the mini dealer, because there were some recalls. A recall is like an extended warranty. It's a safety recall, and yours may be covered. I know on the newer minis they were covered, and it's possible on yours there is. So I would suggest calling the mini dealer to see if it's covered. It's a pretty big job because the seat's got to come out. It's got to be skinned. The cover's got to be taken off of it. It's a big webbed sensor that goes across this very bottom of the seat itself, and then the skin's got to be put all back together and everything percolated, finished up. Okay, I think that pretty well has everything. This sliding roof fault was no big deal. It simply said that the switch had stuck once, but I've already checked your sliding roof and it works fine. So anytime there are faults inside a car and absent of any symptoms, that is to say if there's no complaints from you, then it's none to worry. I'm simply going to go ahead and erase them all, and that's what I'm going to do when I press this auto eraser. It'll erase all those faults. I hope this has been helpful. I will do my best to get you an estimate on the anti-lock brake wheel sensor, the brake pad wear sensor, and the steering angle sensor by the end of the day.